Hi there, it's Florence here, and yes, it's been a while since the last episode. Welcome back to my knitting video podcast where I talk about all the items I finished making recently, anything that I currently have on my needles, and I'll also be showing quite a lot of yarn this episode. It's been, I think, more than a month since my last episode, which is not how we normally do things around here. I try to post every 2 to 3 weeks, but in the last month I have been on 2 summer holidays, and I've just had a lot going on in general. I'm about to move to a new flat. There's just a lot happening. So I haven't knitted that much, but because it has been so long since the last episode, I still have a good amount of stuff to show. And hopefully I'll be back to my regular posting schedule after this. Normally at this point in the video, I talk a little bit about what I'm wearing. Today I'm not wearing anything that I knitted. It's very warm in the UK right now. Not too warm to wear a knitted summer top, admittedly, but I felt like this dress was the thing to wear. And so I don't have any knitwear on my body to discuss, which is fine. I guess we'll jump straight in and talk about the first item that I have to show today, which is this top. I think I showed this top as a work in progress piece in the last episode. I cast this on because I knew I was going on a work trip in a couple of summer holidays, and so I wanted to have a project that I could carry with me in my handbag. I know socks are probably the conventional choice for this, but I find that a summer top on 3mm needles also works just fine, and I fancied knitting a summer top, so this worked out perfectly. Where should I start with this one? I guess I'll start off by talking about the yarn because it should be fairly quick. The yarn that I used to knit this top is the Knitting for Olive merino. It's a 100% merino non-superwash yarn. I have some here. Admittedly, it's not a fresh ball, so it doesn't have a band on it or anything. But I know all the specs of this yarn because I use it so often. This yarn is 250 meters per 50 grams, non-superwash merino. This is the color navy that I use for the stripes. And then for the white-ish color, I used, I think it's marzipan. I will double check that. As usual, the description will have all of the yarn names, colors, the pattern designers, everything will be in there. So if I don't explain anything clearly enough or forget anything, you can find it all there. This is a yarn that I've used like a lot. Pretty much all of my most worn knitted summer tops are made of this yarn. I like this because I find it holds its shape a lot better than a lot of the like summer fibre blends. Knitting for Olive do make a cotton merino. It's pretty cotton heavy. I think it's like 70% cotton. And so I find that these ribbed camisoles in particular stretch out very quickly. And so I find the merino is the best choice. Also, I know I just said it's really hot here, but it isn't that hot in the UK most of the time. Like, it should generally stay below 30 degrees, although it has gone up to 40 in the past. And so I find that these are pretty much fine to wear around, even on the hottest days. Obviously, people have different preferences, but yeah, I love this. Oh, and also it makes your stitches look really even and really nice in a way that they don't always with plant fibres. So depending on the look you're going for, you might find that the merino just looks a little bit cleaner and more polished. It's the elasticity that makes me go for that yarn over more plant fibery alternatives though. So the yarn I didn't swatch with or anything because I've knitted so many similar tops using the same yarn. I was slightly concerned because I jumped straight into this without swatching. That meant I didn't wash my swatch in advance, and so I was very concerned about whether this yarn would bleed. Obviously, I've used Knitting for Olive merino for a bunch of stuff before, but my wardrobe is pretty much all light, cool-toned items. And so I am very familiar with the pale blues and the pale greens and the whites, but I didn't know whether this navy blue was going to bleed. I get so out of breath filming these videos because I talk too fast and I don't give myself time to just breathe, so breathing break. I did post this on my Instagram and I asked if any of my followers had used this yarn combination before and whether you knew whether this bled. And I got messages saying, oh yes, I've used this exact yarn combination, it doesn't bleed. And I also got messages saying, yeah, I've used this exact yarn combination before, it bleeds a lot, you're in so much trouble. And so I was quite nervous because it seemed to be able to go either way. But at least for me, I blocked this and I didn't find that it bled. Well, it did. The water went blue, and when I pressed the excess water out of this top using a towel, the blue was lifting from the stripes and you could see where the stripes were on the towel. But I don't think too much of the navy bled into the marzipan, like it's not really visible on the top itself. I definitely took it out of the water faster than I would have normally, because I didn't want to leave the marzipan colour sitting in blue water. I guess that's probably only necessary for the first wash and less colour will come out next time, so I will be able to wash it properly when it needs proper washing. Overall, I think the yarn combination turned out really nicely. I really do like these colours. I've said this before, but this is like a very greyish cream from Knitting for Olive. They make a lot of different cream yarns. Some of them are a little more yellow, some a little more pink, some a little more grey. Not all creams are made equal, and this greyish one I really, really like. So I really like this top. I guess with that, I'll move on to talk a little bit more about the pattern and the actual process of knitting it. The pattern is, as I said, I think, the lined loop top. It's by Other Loops, who is, I think, a Danish designer. I've knitted a few patterns by Other Loops before, I think, or at the very least I've knitted the twist loop top, which is another of her summer top designs. I love that pattern. I really love that top, even though I knitted it using a very silly yarn for a summer top, and so I can't really wear it in hot weather. I have encouraged a lot of other people to knit it. This summer, both my mum and my sister knitted their own twist loop tops using better yarn choices than I did, and so that was really fun to see. And this is the sort of pattern that I'm very familiar with. I didn't want something for traveling that I had to think too much about. So I didn't want to knit something from my own brain, because that requires a lot of maths that I don't want to be doing on holiday or on a work trip. And these sorts of ribbed negative ease camisoles, I've just made a bunch of already. I like quite a lot of negative ease on my summer tops. And so I pretty much always knit the extra small without reading any sizing advice or knitting a gauge swatch, and that's exactly what I did here. So this is the smallest size, plus I added in some waist decreases to make it even smaller. I just think that these tops look at their best when they're very fitted. Okay, so I'll touch briefly on the things that I did that were not in the pattern. Firstly, the waist decreases. I add waist decreases to basically all of my hand knitted ribbed summer tops. I'll try to show them to you. Oh, I think they're quite visible there. That looks good. Yeah, you can see them. Basically, I just increased on either side of like 2 of the knit sections in the ribbing, and it's barely visible. I think it looks really good. The other modification that I made was I changed how the collar was knitted. This pattern uses an I-cord to finish the armholes, which you can see here. I always think this looks really, really nice. And it was supposed to use a double knitted collar. So you start off by knitting in rib, and then after a few rounds you switch to double knitting, and then you end up doing, I guess, a tubular bind off at the end. But when I was starting to bind it off, it became like immediately apparent to me that my head was not going to go through this head hole. And this top doesn't have a particularly small head hole. I haven't checked whether my gauge was off. I mean, the head hole now looks kind of head hole sized, so I don't think that was particularly the problem. But maybe I was just binding off too tightly. In any case, I was concerned enough about it that I wasn't even confident that if I ripped back the bind off or even a couple of rounds of double knitting, that then it would be large enough. And so what I ended up doing was I just cut off the whole collar with a pair of scissors. I was not feeling very patient at that point. I was near to finishing this top and I just wanted it done so I could wear it already. So yeah, I cut the whole thing off and picked up stitches again, and I just went for a tried and tested folded ribbed collar. So I picked up stitches at the same pickup rate that was recommended in the pattern, I'm pretty sure. I switched colour for the middle rounds. So it has the white and then the dark blue, which is the same kind of look it has in the original pattern with the double knitting. And then I switched back to white to finish off, and then I knitted the live stitches together with where I'd picked up the stitches and bound off at the same time. Since I was feeling pretty concerned about getting the bind off loose enough, since I had messed it up the first time round, I ended up doing a sort of combination of a surprisingly stretchy bind off and knitting the live stitches together with the picked up edge. So what I did was I would knit, because it was knit one, purl one ribbing, I would knit the knit stitches together with the pick up edge, and then for the purl stitches I would do a yarn over and then purl. Yeah, I think that's right. And then I was binding off as I went, so I'll see if I can explain this in a way that makes more sense. What I would do was, assuming I have one stitch on my right needle and the next stitch is a knit stitch, I would knit one together with the pick up edge, lift a stitch over and off like you do when you're binding off. Then I would yarn over, purl one, and put the yarn over and the other stitch over and off, which is basically like a surprisingly stretchy bind off, and then I repeated that. So I was combining the two bind offs, and the result is a collar that has quite a lot of stretch, like This is very, very stretchy. It's not a problem at all. It doesn't look too bad. It would look neater if I hadn't done the surprisingly stretchy bind off at the same time, but it's not enough to bother me. It's on the inside anyway, and I don't think that it looks bad. Sorry, my hands are really stained with blush, if you're wondering why my finger is very pink. I'm fine. Obviously the stretchiness might cause issues in that I could imagine this collar might stretch out a little bit over time, but particularly because it's a folded collar, it will be very easy to hide some elastic around the inside, so I don't think it will be a problem. Okay, I think I'm getting there. Those are the only things that I did differently to the pattern. Other than that, oh, and the length, which of course I did not measure. I basically followed the instructions for the size extra small exactly. I know some people will be curious about the stripes and whether that means you have to weave in a lot of ends. You actually don't have to. You basically carry both colours the whole time, and you can trap the darker colour along the side of the knitting in a few places like you would when you're trapping a float in colourwork. So you don't have to cut your yarn at all between stripes. I'll show you on the inside in case you're curious. This is the inside where I carried both colours when I was knitting stripes in the other colour. And then this is how it looks on the outside. So you can kind of see it does show through a little bit where I was carrying the other colour, but it's not super visible. I think it looks fine. So yes, overall I'm very happy with it. I like the fit. As always, I could certainly have knitted it a little bit longer, but I tend to be quite impatient with these things. Overall, I think that this is a lovely top, and it will go into my summer top rotation with all of my other favourite summer tops. I do recommend checking it out. I do find that these patterns are generally written quite well. Okay, so that's, I think, my one finished object, but I do have a half finished object in the form of a sock, which is fun because you basically get to see what the finished object will look like. I just haven't done the second sock yet. The Moomin Socks book. Add, this section is sponsored. This book was sent to me by Search Press, who are the UK publishers, I guess. And then the yarn was sent to me by Novita, which is the, I guess, Finnish yarn brand that produces the yarn that's used in these patterns. I think I've discussed this quite a bit in previous episodes. I was basically sent this book by Search Press because it was being published in English for the first time. I know this book has been available in various other languages for much longer. It is a book of about 29 Moomin themed sock patterns. They're all DK weight socks. I'm pretty sure they all use the same yarn and they're all done in colourwork. If you're somebody who likes Moomins, you will really like this book because it has basically a whole bunch of charts that you can use not just for making these DK weight socks as described in this book, but you can also totally use these charts in other places if you want to put Moomin characters onto anything else. There are both stranded colourwork charts in here and also duplicate stitch charts, so whatever you're looking for, you'll probably find it. I was planning on buying this book anyway, like I knew it was coming out. I'd seen it in Waterstones on like the list of coming soon books, and then Search Press offered me a copy for free if I wanted to knit a pair, and so I obviously said yes. This was the pair that I decided to make. The pattern is called the Moomin House. The whole sock looks like the Moomin House. I think it's really cute. The cuff has like a faux cable situation on it that looks a little bit like roof tiles, and then it has Moomin House leg and a flower garden foot. It is very, very cute. I mentioned last time I picked this pattern partly because I liked it, and also partly because Novita was sponsoring the yarn, and this uses, I think, like 6 colours. And realistically, apart from the white and maybe the blue, I would have had to buy all of these colours individually because they're not the sort of colours that I already have scrap amounts of lying around. Like, I've never knitted anything yellow, I don't think. That's just a lie. I actually have an entire yellow jumper. My point being, I don't knit with bright colours a lot. I don't have sock yarn in bright colours, and so I was making the most of getting it sent to me. The yarn, I think, is just called Moomin House. Yeah, the yarn that is used is Moomin House yarn from Novita, which is a DK weight sock yarn. I'm pretty sure it is wool and nylon. I don't have any balls left with like the band on them, so I can't read the fibre content, but they're wool nylon sock yarn, which I always really like. The colours are just a bit strong for my taste, but still. I knitted the sock. This sock I expected to be quite easy. I'd mentioned before I have never knitted colourwork socks before. I have knitted a lot of colourwork, like I have a lot of colourwork jumpers, I've done a few pairs of colourwork mittens, and I've also knitted like, I think like 30 pairs of socks. I have a lot of socks, but I have never done a colourwork sock. And the reason why is I'm very afraid of tension, and I'm afraid I won't be able to get the sock over my foot. I feel like with colour work, because you have like floats in a different colour behind the front of the fabric, when you stretch the fabric you can see those floats, and so it starts to look quite messy. But also like the amount of stretch that you can get at a maximum isn't very much, and so there's a much narrower range of acceptable diameters you can knit the sock at while having it fit you. I have known many people knit an entire colourwork sock and then find out that it isn't going to fit over their foot, and so I was very afraid. But still, when I went into it, I was like, how bad can it be? The way this book works is that each pattern is written for a single UK shoe size. This is not that common, I don't think, with knitting patterns. Normally with socks, the sizing is based on your foot circumference, and then the expectation is that you knit it to length. And the fact that this was only written for a UK size, was it like 4? I'm a UK size 7. There was no way that the circumference was going to be wide enough either, like just because this pattern is clearly designed for women with very small feet. It only comes in one size. Some of the socks in this book do come in multiple sizes. This, I don't think, was one of them. There is a section at the front of the book where it offers some general advice on adapting the socks to different sizes, but I didn't feel like recharting it. And so I was like, oh, I'll just go up a couple of needle sizes, it will be fine. I had to knit this sock multiple times, or at least I had to knit the top part a couple of times to get it right, and what I ended up doing was going up to a 4.5mm needle. I think this sock is supposed to be knitted on a 3mm needle, so that is quite a big increase in needle size. And this is both due to me having pretty tight tension when I knit colour work that I'm aware of, and also me just having quite large feet and quite chunky legs. So yeah, I did the cuff on a 3.5mm needle, I did the rest of the sock on a 4.5mm needle, and I don't think it looks too bad. Obviously the risk when you go up that many needle sizes for socks is that the gauge is looser. Socks are normally supposed to be knitted at quite a tight gauge because that way the sock is going to be stronger, like there's more fabric. The more loose it is, the less fabric there is for you to wear through, and so the sock is more likely to get holes in it. But since this is DK anyway, it's really thick, I'm just not that concerned. I think it looks good and I think it will wear just fine. Besides, this is going to be a house sock, like this isn't something I'm planning on wearing to the office, to say the least. So I think it will all be okay. Now, aside from the whole sizing situation, I really did enjoy this pattern a lot. When you look at it, it looks like it might be one of those colourwork patterns that's very inconvenient to knit. Like, you think it might have a lot of very long floats, and it does have a couple, particularly in between these windows. There are rows where you have to carry the yarn from this vertical line all the way to this vertical line, which is quite a long float. These are the rounds where you have to be the most careful about keeping your tension loose enough to get the sock onto your foot. I know some people say you should or shouldn't catch floats when you're knitting socks. I do catch my floats pretty frequently, mostly because I get quite afraid of getting my feet caught in the floats when I'm putting the sock on. But I found it was easy enough to keep the tension loose enough once I was on this big needle size. Also, I know that something like this might look quite scary. This little porch roof is added on afterwards with duplicate stitch, so you don't even have to worry about that. I think it was my first time doing duplicate stitch, apart from using it to fix colour work that I've messed up before. But I did it for the porch roof and also for the centres of all of these flowers, and I think it looks really lovely. I will definitely be using duplicate stitch to decorate some more of my knitwear in the future. I think it's such a pretty sock. It really makes me happy. I'm really happy that I was given the yarn and I was forced to use these very vibrant colours that I wouldn't otherwise have reached for, because the result is so pretty. And if I'd knitted this with my own choice of yarn, I would have gone for colours that are much more muted, and I don't think it would have brought me as much joy. Oh yeah, also the heel construction is different to anything I've done before. I don't know if you can see, but the heel has like a slip stitch heel flap, much like I always do, but this one has the slip stitches wrap around onto the bottom of the foot. The whole way that this bottom part of the heel is constructed is very different from the typical heel flap and gusset that I normally knit, and so that was really fun to do. Overall, I enjoyed it a lot. I'm a little concerned because it's been a while since I knitted this, and for the second one I've just done the cuff. I need to get going with the rest of the sock, but I think I went to a smaller needle size for the heel. I don't really remember that. I don't remember how many rounds I did in between doing each thing. So yes, I'll try and follow the pattern as closely as possible, and hopefully the 2 socks will turn out fairly similar. Oh, and I will just say, like, I added, I think, just 1 or maybe 2 extra flowers just to make it long enough for my foot as well, even with this bigger gauge. So that is the Moomin House sock. I know a lot of you are really interested in this book, and I think I do recommend it. Like, have a look at the patterns first, see if they are the sort of thing you're into, because they are mostly quite duplicate stitch, like embroidered detail heavy. It will take some effort to knit these socks. There aren't very many small repeated patterns on them. For the most part, it tends to be like fairly big scale color work. If you like the designs, I did find the knitting process really enjoyable. The patterns are written clearly, and I would say that this is probably something that's best for more experienced knitters, just because of the complications with like adjusting the sizing to fit your foot, and also with getting the tension right, because I've been knitting for a pretty long time and I still found it a bit fiddly to do correctly. Okay, while we're at it, I'll talk about another sock very briefly. You might remember that I have 2 other socks on the go, neither of which I've knitted on recently. I just cast on a different sock. So I now have 4 pairs of socks on the go, which is madness, and I need to get on and finish them. But I'll talk about this sock yarn more when I move on at the end to speak about all of the yarn that I accumulated on my summer holidays. But I got this sock yarn and I was so excited to use it, because it just sort of fits my preferences perfectly, that I had to cast on a sock right away. This is tukuwool sock. Again, I will talk a little bit more about it later, but it is a, I think, non-superwash wool and nylon sock yarn, which is my favorite kind of sock yarn. It's really hard to find. Normally people either will want a non-superwash sock yarn with no nyloning because they don't want plastic in their socks, which I totally get, but I am quite hard on my socks. Like, I wear them a lot. I wear them with boots and I wear through them. I don't trust a sock yarn without nylon in to stay intact. But also I don't like the way superwash feels, or particularly the way superwash looks most of the time. And so I really would like to find non-superwash wool with nylon for socks. And this is totally that. It's also quite thick for a sock yarn. I'm knitting this on 2.5mm needles and it feels almost too thick for that, which I actually really like. Like, it feels very plush, and I think the finished sock will be really, really warm and really sturdy. I have cast on a sock which looks like this. The pattern that I'm using is called Chamomile and it's by Yuka. If you've watched my podcast before, you'll know that I love sock patterns by the designer Yuka. She is a Japanese knitwear designer who does mostly socks. She has so many sock patterns, she releases them constantly. A few of her designs are in the second 52 Weeks of Socks book, so if you have that book and you're curious about her pattern writing style, you can have a look at the 2 Yuka patterns in there. If you like them, she has loads of them on her Ravelry. You can buy all the patterns individually, and they're just really thorough and detailed with really great like diagrams in them, lots of really detailed information on gauge, and they're generally written for magic loop. So if you're somebody who likes knitting socks with magic loop, like myself, then that is something that's really helpful. I should say, I'm pretty sure at least the pattern I followed in the Moomin sock book was written for DPNs. I find it very easy to switch from instructions written for DPNs to magic loop, so I always knit my socks with magic loop without any problems, but that is something to keep in mind. I assume the other socks in that book are also written for DPNs, but I'm not actually sure. Anyway, this is a newer Yuka pattern. It's called Chamomile. It actually comes in a sort of set of 2 patterns. They're all really well priced, actually. They're not expensive sock patterns at all, but it's a set called Chamomile and Vanilla. You can probably see we have this sort of 6-petaled flower looking lace here, and then these braid looking things with eyelets on either side, here and on the sides. The vanilla sock is kind of similar, but it just has these braids. It doesn't have the flower eyelets, and then the chamomile has both. And it also includes instructions to do, I think, a ruffle for the top of one of the pairs of socks. That's kind of typical of Yuka patterns. There are often different instructions for doing like tabby toes on your socks or all kinds of things. A lot of her sock patterns are toe up. I prefer to knit socks cuff down, but just this once I decided to go ahead and try doing a toe up sock. I think I even did a little bit of a curved toe. I always just knit a plain wedge toe, but I think I actually followed the instructions at least a little bit, and I'm doing a curved toe. Normally I would always knit the biggest size when knitting socks, or close to the biggest size. I'm actually going for, I think this is the middle size, just because this sock yarn is so thick. And yeah, that's what it looks like so far. I'm having a lot of fun. As I said, these are 2.5mm needles. These ones are my Chiaogus. I really like Chiaogus for magic loop socks just because of this really long memory-free cable. It doesn't get any kinks or anything in it when you use it for magic loop, even if the cable is a little shorter. So this is an 80cm cable. I think with other brands I tend to go for a 100cm cable, or when I say that, I mean 100cm from needle tip to needle tip. It's not a 100cm cable. But yeah, I tend to go for something longer when I'm using magic loop because of the tendency the cable has to like fold, and maybe the needles end up at a little bit of an angle relative to the cable. But because that doesn't happen with this one, I can use a shorter cable, which is really useful for the cable not getting in the way and for being able to carry this project around easily. So yes, I'm going to try and speed through these since they are moving quite quickly, and then I promise I will not cast on any more socks until I finish all 4 of the ones I have on the go at the moment. Hold me to that and tell me off if I fail. Okay, maybe. I think I have so many things on the go that I actually can't go through them all in this episode, but I should definitely stop and talk about the big one. First of all, I will just show, I've showed this a bunch of times before. If you have watched my videos, you've probably seen it. This huge thing is my recreation of the Albertville 1992 Winter Olympics jumper by Dala of Norway for the Norwegian ski team. I've talked about it a bunch. It's a pretty classic colourwork jumper that is steeked. I enjoyed this so much that I want to make another one. And so since the Olympics are, as of filming this, currently ongoing, I am running a small knit-along. Well, it's not really small. I think there's like 400 people in my Discord server where we are knitting these Dala Olympic jumpers while watching the Olympics. So if you're interested in knitting a jumper like this or like the one I'm about to show, then definitely join the Discord server. I'll leave a link to join the server in the video description. Anyway, the Olympics has started. I honestly haven't been knitting that much, but I have got going with this jumper. And this is what it's currently looking like. I will put a picture here of what it is going to look like when it's done. This is the Lillehammer 1994, which is probably the most famous of these Dala ski jumpers. It is definitely a little bit on the challenging side, not because the colourwork itself is challenging. I've said this before. I think these sorts of steep jumpers are some of the easiest colourwork projects that you can do. Because the body is so large circumference, it's very comfortable to knit. I find it's a lot more fiddly knitting colourwork on a small circumference. But also the whole jumper is basically constructed from 3 tubes. I steeked the neck hole on the Albertville, and so I really didn't do anything apart from some small number of increases to shape the sleeves. Except for that, the whole thing was just stockinette tubes. And so it's actually a really easy colourwork project to get started with, and I know a lot of people in the server are knitting this as their first colourwork project. But yeah, with this Lillehammer one in particular, the actual design in the colourwork is really involved, and that it's not really a repeating pattern. It has these 3 images on the front and they're all different. And so I don't really know how I'm going to do it. I don't have a printer, so I can't print the chart out, and it's a big chart with no repeats. And it's going to take some thought. So I've been kind of putting it off. I'm still on this easy part near the bottom where the pattern does still repeat, and so I don't have to worry about it. Maybe I can like go to Ryman's and get it printed big size or something. That's probably the move, isn't it? I posted this on Instagram and a lot of people really liked my colour selection. The yarn that I'm using is this. It's from Rosa Pomar and it's called Vovo. I think does it mean grandmother? It's something to do with grandmothers. I don't have a ball to hand, but the packaging has a very cute drawing of like a tattooed grandma hugging a sheep. It's really cute. This is a sport weight, non-superwash wool yarn. I think it works pretty perfectly for this jumper. For the reasons I mentioned previously, to do with the neck hole being steekable if you want to, the fact that the armholes are steeked, all that. I think that this jumper also copes really well with gauge modifications, in that because you're just knitting tubes, if you can just calculate a different number of stitches that you need to get the width of tube you want, you're basically good to go. And so you can kind of knit this with any weight of yarn, give or take, and any needle size to get the fabric that you want. With that being said, I think I'm actually pretty close to the original pattern recommended gauge. The original pattern is knitted using DK weight yarn on 3mm needles. I think between different versions of the patterns, even for the same jumper, the listed gauge varies, so make sure to check the exact pattern you're looking at, but I think they generally ask for somewhere between a 22 and 24 stitch gauge. I am using a 4.5mm needle, so this is the second time in this video I've had to go up from a 3mm needle to a 4.5mm needle. Again, it's colour work. My gauge in colour work is particularly tight, and I did swatch pretty thoroughly for this before I started, so I'm happy with the size it's going to end up being. And I will say also, there are a few slightly longer floats in these patterns. Obviously it will vary with exactly which pattern you're knitting, but for the most part they do just use 2 colours at once, so it's not particularly challenging. I really would encourage you, if you are interested in knitting one of these, to just give it a go. Don't stress too much about it, even if you haven't done a lot of colour work. You will be surprised how easy it is, and particularly if you join the Discord server. I don't benefit from you joining the Discord server, like, I'm not trying to profit from this. It's a resource if you'd like it. There are a lot of people knitting these jumpers, and so they'll be able to help you out if you get stuck on anything. So yes, that is my Tummanharmaa 1994. I'm just like plugging away at it, taking my time. I will get it done eventually for winter. I will wear this on Christmas jumper day in the office, just so you wait and see. I might not win Best Office Christmas Jumper, but I will know in my heart that I deserved to win Best Office Christmas Jumper. I'm going to skip over some other work in progresses that I haven't made so much progress with, or that are less interesting, just because I don't want to be here forever. But I will show this. This is my newest work in progress, and I cast this on last night, and we have quite a lot going on. I was looking at some pictures of myself last winter with my scarf and my hat, and I just looked like the beigest person ever, which is fine. Beige is a very pretty colour, but with my like off-white hat and my grey scarf and my big beige coat, I was just feeling like I could do a little better this year and add a little more colour into my outfits this winter. And so since I'm getting a new pastel colour jacket anyway, I thought I should knit myself a hat and a scarf to pair with it. Also because I think a lot of the projects that I have on the go at the moment are very involved, that they involve colour work or more complicated constructions, or just they require some more thought. And a scarf or a hat are the perfect no thoughts, like just knit projects that I can take to knitting meetups. I can knit in front of TV with plot, that kind of thing. So I decided to treat myself to special yarn. This is very special yarn. This is what I've got so far, and this yarn is Cardiff Cashmere Classic. I've used this a few times before on this channel. It is, I think I've said this before, like if you want to treat yourself to cashmere yarn and you know that you're going to spend a lot of money on it, I think you won't be disappointed with this one, in that it really does feel that special. I've used some other cashmere yarns where like you could kind of believe they're cashmere or maybe a cashmere blend, like they feel good but not great. This is very, very lightly spun and very fluffy, and so it creates really magical, special feeling finished items. I always find it's easier to spend a lot of money making something like a scarf or a hat, because I know that I can wear it every day with a lot of different outfits, rather than it being like a jumper that I wear once a week, you know? And so the colour that I got is called Baby. I bought it from Knitted Home. They do the boxed sets of Cardiff Cashmere, so I got a box of 10 balls, and I spent £130, I think £129.99. I spent £130 on these 10 balls of yarn, so this is going to be a very expensive set, but I am having a lovely time knitting it. I think also I'm not going to finish a scarf unless it's with yarn that I feel really excited about knitting with, because it's just a big stockinette tube and it's going to drive me to madness. So in terms of yarn quantity, I wanted to just buy 10 balls. I was hoping I'd have enough to do a scarf and a hat. And so I cast on the scarf first. I bought the Petite Knit Vienna set pattern for this. This is how little I wanted to think about this project, okay? The pattern for the Vienna set scarf is just like cast on X number of stitches, knit a tube, bind off. And you can tell that from looking at the scarf, but I didn't want to think about how many stitches would be right. I just know that I liked how it looked in Petite Knit's picture, and so I bought the pattern for like, I don't know, 30 krona, just to see the stitch count that was used. And I guess that means that if I want to make matching mittens in the future, I do now have the pattern to do so, which would honestly be really cute. That is quite tempting. I think I checked and the scarf is supposed to take 7 balls of Cardiff Cashmere Classic, which leaves me with 3 for the hat, which I think will hopefully be just enough. But I did cast on the scarf, and then I thought it would make more sense to knit the hat first, because this way I can knit the hat, use however much yarn I need to use, and then use up anything left on the scarf, get it as long as possible, and if I need to buy an extra ball, I can buy an extra ball. So I'm hoping to get the hat done within 3 balls of yarn to leave 7 for the scarf. And this is the hat. I am using the pattern for the Petite Knit Oslo hat. I really like this hat. I've knitted it 3 times so far, and I've gifted the pattern to various other people as well, since I think it's a really good beginner knitting project. And I really like this hat pattern because it's not rib, it's stockinette all over, which I think just looks really clean and really good. And I thought it would pair really well with the all stockinette scarf too. Now, this pattern is written for DK weight yarn, which this in theory is, but I think that this is kind of a lighter DK weight. And so I'm using 3.5mm needles, and the gauge is a little tighter than it perhaps would be if I was using, well, when I've knitted this hat before, I've used Sandnesgarn Double Sunday, which is definitely quite a bit thicker. And so basically I normally knit, I think, the second largest size for this hat, but I'm knitting the stitch count from the largest size, and I'm just hoping that the size will work out. Again, I haven't checked my gauge, I haven't done any maths. I'm just thinking this looks head-sized, hopefully. Anyway, I have almost finished the bit you do before you fold and knit together with the cast on edge to create the double or triple thickness section around your head. This pattern just looks really cute, and I'm really excited to have it done. I'm going to finish this hat probably this weekend. Today's Saturday afternoon. I have strong belief in my ability to knit a lot on this, and from that point onwards the scarf will become my just carrying it around everywhere project that I take to work, that I take to knitting meetups, things like that, because I know that I can just knit a tube, not think about it until it's longer than I am tall. Okay, so I am going to now move on to talk about yarn that I've picked up. I sometimes have very little yarn to show in one of these episodes. Today, I have a lot. Like, I appreciate this is a wild amount of yarn. What I will say about this is that I went on 2 summer holidays for basically a week each. I went to Wales first with my family, and we stayed in a really cute farmhouse. Wales is famous for having a lot of sheep. To be honest, not much wool in Wales ends up being processed and turned into yarn, which is kind of sad, but by complete coincidence we walked into the most incredible yarn shop. It was called the Welsh Wool Shop. Actually, I just really needed some 4.5mm needles for the Moomin socks, and I was searching desperately in this random tiny town in Wales for 4.5mm needles, and I ended up at probably one of the best yarn shops I've ever been into. Which is run by someone who just seems to be completely devoted to stocking local Welsh wool from different breeds of sheep. A lot of it is very beautifully dyed. All the yarn I'm going to show pretty much from my holidays is undyed wool, I think, but they had a lot of really pretty colourful stuff. My sister got a beautiful blue sweater quantity, and it was so magical and so unexpected. I did buy yarn there. My second trip was to Helsinki. Again, Finland has a lot of wool, it seems, and so I bought more there. So I'll just go through everything that I got. I'll show it to you, and I guess I'll go in chronological order. So I'll start off with the stuff that I picked up in Wales. So from the Welsh Wool Shop, I bought 2 sweater quantities of yarn. This is the first. This is from Wits and Flock, which I believe is the same person who runs the Welsh Wool Shop. It is a Poll Dorset yarn. So Poll Dorset is a specific type of sheep, I suppose. And when I was in the shop and I was looking at all the different yarn there, she suggested that I try this one because I was saying that I don't like cream yarn that's very yellow. So I was looking at light grey yarn because I find a lot of cream pulls very yellow. And she was telling me that this Poll Dorset yarn tends to be a lot more white than some of the other cream yarn. And yeah, it is a really pretty cream without too much yellow in it that I think would suit me quite well. It's a DK weight. Oh dear. This is all in Imperial, which is a language I do not speak. WPI, is that wraps per inch? 12 wraps per inch. Is that a substitute for gauge? I don't know. 100 grams is 225 yards. I don't know how much a yard is. It's over 200 meters, I'm pretty sure. I bought 6 of these. I think there was a buy 5 get 1 free deal, which worked out well. So I should have plenty to knit something. This would look stunning with cables, I think. It's definitely quite a sort of plump DK. Like this is a proper DK, unlike, you know, the Cardiff Cashmere that's very thin. It feels very substantial. This honestly isn't too scratchy. I'm pretty sure you can buy this yarn, or maybe not this exact one, but you can buy yarn from this shop online. There is, I think, currently a somewhat limited selection, but I think more, it might be added at some point. I really recommend checking out this shop if you are in southwest Wales. I will always mention the shops where I bought things in the description as well, in case you feel like visiting them, if you're in that sort of area or if you fancy a nice trip. The second sweater quantity that I got at the Welsh wool shop is not from the flock of the woman who runs the Welsh wool shop. It's like a different Welsh wool brand that she stocks. This is a BFL and Gotland 4-ply. It says BFL fleeces from a single farm blended with our Gotland fleeces from a farm in southwest Wales. This is from a shop called Pure Welsh. It says their Etsy shop is called Pure Welsh, and it gives a Facebook page as well. I don't use Facebook. So this is 60% BFL, 40% Gotland. 100 grams is 360 meters. And this is, I suppose, a fingering weight yarn. This color is beautiful. It's a pale gray, and I've said this before, I love when pale gray yarn is not from yarn that's dyed gray, but rather it's from like some dark and some pale yarn spun together, and so it has that heathered look to it. Is heathered the word? I'm not sure, but I think these are the prettiest pale grays, and it's a color of yarn that I just keep going back to and knitting more stuff in. It's really, really beautiful. I got this because it's extremely soft. I mean, if you're very sensitive to wool, you will probably not like this, but like as non-superwash Welsh wool goes, I feel like this is very, very soft. It feels really good. And I think I got like 4 of these. I don't know if I'll hold it with mohair or something, possibly, but it's grey fingering weight yarn. I feel okay just having this in my stash because I'm sure I will come up with a project I want to knit at some point that this will work well for. Okay, so those were the wools that I bought at the Welsh wool shop. And then the second holiday I went on to Helsinki, I did ask on Instagram for recommendations from people on places to go and things to do in Helsinki, and almost every single response I got to that was telling me to go to a yarn shop called Snurra. I may be pronouncing this wrong, I'm certainly pronouncing this wrong, but again, it will be in the description if you can't figure out what I'm talking about. Anyway, there were some other yarn shops recommended, but they were a little bit more of a trek from the centre of Helsinki, and so I ended up just going to Snurra because I was with my sister, and she likes yarn, but not as much as I like yarn. I didn't want to push my luck. So at Snurra I bought 2 sweater quantities again. Firstly, I bought some yarn from tukuwool. Tukuwool is available in the UK. I just don't get to see it in person, and so if I want to get more of this, it's something that I can fairly easily find. But this is tukuwool DK. It feels like quite a light DK, honestly. It's pretty thin. I don't know about colours. I will put them all in the description if I can find them. I don't have any with the ball band still on because I don't have a working yarn winder at the moment, and so I ended up going to the Wool Hound in Oxford. It's like a shop in the Oxford Cover Market to wind all of my yarn in one go, and I saved a couple of hanks so I can show you what the packaging looks like, but not these. So yes, all of the yarn will be linked in the description. This is tukuwool DK, and I plan on using this to knit a Tombow sweater, which is going to be a DK weight jumper version of the Tombow T, which is a pattern I released some time ago. I have already cast it on, but I've changed my mind about what needle size I want to use, so it's going to get ripped out and I'm going to start over. But yeah, it's really beautiful and I'm looking forward to knitting it up. And then I also got 2 hanks of tukuwool sock as well. These are 100 grams, 320 meters, and these are 80% Finnish wool and 20% polyamide. Oh yeah, I should say, I was trying hard to buy Welsh wool in Wales and also Finnish wool in Finland. When I was at Snurra, they had like little Finnish flags in all of the containers of yarn that are from Finland, so it was easy to spot things that I might be interested in. As I said, I really love how this sock yarn feels. This one is colour number 3, but I also got the cream colour that I showed earlier knitting the Yucca chamomile sock. and I think these will make the best winter socks. I'm so excited to knit this up, particularly this colour, because this feels like something that I can like wear a lot inside dark coloured boots and not ruin. It's so pretty. And then I got one more sweater quantity. This one is from vuonue. I don't know how to pronounce this. Now I'll show it to you, but I'm not sure you can even read it either. I think this is the brand. It's spelled vuonue, and the yarn is called Tilta. It's 100% finished wool, again 100 grams, 230 meters, and it's a DK weight. And this color, it's definitely a dark color for me, but I think it's really pretty. It's a really dark brown. They did have some really pretty paler colors, but there wasn't a full sweater quantity left, so I ended up going with this one, and I think I will really end up liking it. All of these feel very woolly, like these finish yarns, they feel very woolly. So if you are sensitive to wool, you will probably want to pass on all of these. These are probably slightly pushing my tolerance for woolly wool, which I think is usually pretty high. Definitely this will be knitted up into something that I want to wear over some other garment, you know? But I think I'll be very toasty this winter. I spent so much at Snurra that I filled up the loyalty card, and so if I can get back to Finland sometime soon, I get a 20% discount on my next purchase. You know, I'm actually thinking about it. I really, really liked Helsinki. So that is all of my summer holiday yarn. I did pick up one more sweater quantity once I was back in the UK. This is bought from the Wool Hound, which is the shop in the Oxford Covered Market, and I just bought this because they were having a 40% off sale, and I've been looking at this yarn for a long time. It being 40% off was enough to convince me to buy some. This is from Erika Knight. I have used Erika Knight Wool Local before to knit a pair of colourwork mittens for my mum. I think I've actually bought some Wool Local that I have under my bed as well that I need to use, but that was the fingering weight. This is their British Blue Wool, which is pure British Blue-Face Leicester wool. And this is a grey, but it's like very much a dyed grey rather than being a natural sort of grey. And to hold with it, I got this. You might have seen this before. It's from Rico, and it is Rico Creative Make It Tweed. It is something you'd hold with your wool, much like mohair or like an alpaca lace weight. But this basically just has tweed flecks in it. So this is the rainbow coloured one. I think there is now a neutral one available, and there's definitely like a pink and a neon green or whatever. But you can hold it with something else and it will add rainbow tweed flecks to it, which I think will be really pretty. If you're wanting Noro on a budget, I think this might be a really helpful yarn to use, because it's only £6.25 per ball, and the yardage is a lot. What is it? 445 meters. So yeah, if you're doing something kind of chunky, you'd only need 2 of these, at least for my clothing size. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to trying this out. I have seen some people messaging me saying that it's quite fiddly to knit with, but also saying that it looks super cool. And so I'm hoping that this combination will look really good. I think particularly for something that's very plain stockinette, this will just add a little bit of spice to this greyish brown colour. Okay, that is a wild amount of wool. If you sat through that, congratulations. I will now be not buying much wool for a while because I'm basically all kitted out to knit beautiful things for most of the winter. I'm so excited to get back into winter knitting. Currently it's so hot, I'm just sitting in my house with like my fan pointed at my hands so that I'm able to keep knitting with wool all summer. I just love wool, and summer fibres don't make me happy in the same way, so I'm just going to suffer through it. Anyway, I think that's it from me today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will be back much sooner this time round with another episode to share progress on these things I've spoken about, and probably some new stuff as well. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.